When it comes to saving money on food, it's not just what you spend at the store that counts.
Today, we're not talking about clipping coupons. We're not talking about comparison shopping. We're not talking about anything that you do when you actually walk into a grocery store and purchase your food. Instead, what we're going to do is give you some tips and strategies to help you save money on your food bill. And it all has to do with how you handle that food and you cook with that food after you get back home.
If you don't know us, I'm Larry.
And I'm Hope.
And we're from Under the Median, where every week we bring videos on practical frugality.
Tip number 1, and this is one of my favorites. I use it nearly every single week. Centering your weekly menu plan around 1 or 2 ingredients that you got very, very inexpensively. I'm going to walk you through a scenario and show you exactly what I mean.
Start with 2 pounds of dried chickpeas that cost Hope only $3.50 for the 2 pounds.
Wash the chickpeas thoroughly, put them into the pressure cooker, cover them with at least 2 times the amount of water as compared to chickpeas. Put the lid of the pressure cooker on. You're going to pressure cook it for about 28 minutes and allow it to naturally release the pressure.
By the way, stay tuned. Hope is going to show you how to make 10 meals out of that 2 pounds of dried chickpeas.
Remove the lid from the pressure cooked chickpeas and remove 8 cups of chickpeas. You should have just enough chickpeas left in the bottom of the pressure cooker along with the liquid from the chickpeas. That will become the base of a chickpea soup.
Hope created this recipe years ago when she saw something similar in a cookbook.
I'll start by adding onions, carrots, celery. I had a little bit of leftover cauliflower, guys, so I just threw that into the soup pot too. Soup is a great way to use up all of the odds and ends of vegetables that you have left at the end of the week. Then I add tomatoes. Sometimes I add a 16-ounce can of just diced tomatoes. In this case, I had a large can of tomato sauce that I had left over, so I put that into the soup pot. Make sure that you're not wasting any of the sauce that's left over in the can, so to avoid doing that, I fill the can full of water, mix it up a little bit, and then throw that water into the soup pot as well. Half a cup of rice is the last dry ingredient you'll add. Then I add several different seasonings to the pot. Onion powder, garlic powder, oregano, no salt seasoning. Basically, it's going to taste like an Italian feast in that soup pot, guys.
Make sure that you seal the lid and then pressure cook that for 20 minutes. This is a very flavorful meal and we absolutely enjoy it.
By the way, this pressure cooker full of soup will feed our family for 3 meals.
Recipe number 2 is tuna salad. That's like tuna salad, only it's for vegan people.
You guys, this is so good. You're going to want to eat it by the spoonful. Let me walk you through exactly how to make the recipe. I start with chickpeas and then I add onions, celery, and some chopped pickles. And although the original recipe did call for vegan mayonnaise, I seldom have mayonnaise in my house, vegan or otherwise. I just don't buy mayonnaise. So I substitute some other flavors in order to give it a little bit more fat.
So instead of mayonnaise, Hope substitutes mustard, walnuts, lemon juice, and a little soy sauce.
Here are the seasonings that I add. Onion powder, garlic powder, smoked paprika, no salt seasoning. This is a very forgiving sort of sandwich spread, and I have played around with seasonings a lot when I made this sandwich spread, guys.
You'll want to pulse this in the food processor. Keep it a little chunky, sort of the consistency of tuna salad. This batch will make at least 8 sandwiches. That's enough for 2 lunches for our family of 4.
What's really nice about this is you can put this stuff on anything. You can dip it in some tortilla chips. You can spread it on crackers. You can put it on tortillas and roll it up to make roll-ups. We use it on a lot of things over the summer. What's nice about it is this is like a no-cook meal. In the middle of summer when you don't want to put any heat in your house, once you get the chickpeas cooked, really the processing of the sandwich spread doesn't put any heat in the house at all.
Recipe number 3 is a batch of walnut lime chickpea spread.
The walnut lime chickpea spread, I'm going to use 2 cups of the leftover chickpeas for this. This is one of my original recipes, and it is absolutely one of our favorites. Once again, we'll put a few simple ingredients together. It's going to create a spread that you can use for crackers, you can use for chips, you can use it to top baked potatoes if you want. You can use it on top of bread. You can, once again, roll it up in a tortilla. This stuff is so super easy to make. It goes together in about 10 minutes flat, guys. Once again, all you're going to do is dump all the ingredients into the food processor, process it, and you're on your way.
You can put this on top of greens. Just drizzle it with some homemade salad dressing.
You guys, this is amazing for lunches. Recipe number 4, African peanut chickpea stew. I made it really, really thick. I was able to serve it over some rice. And you know what's really nice about this? It's such a thick stew that I was able to put it over the top of some arugula to give it that nice kind of sharp flavor of the arugula, which I really like. He doesn't like it so much, but I love arugula. And I drizzled just a little bit of tahini over the top, and it was absolutely superb.
This is one of the ways that Hope stretches the family food budget to feed our 4 people in our family for $250 a month.
You want the other 9 ways that I stretch the food budget? Get our free guide to saving on groceries, guys. There's going to be a link to it in the description of the video.
The second food prep technique that can actually save you hundreds of dollars a year is to repurpose leftover ingredients.
Let's say that you have 6 cups of leftover rice and you're staring at that rice thinking, what can I do with that rice except just serve it as rice? So many different things, guys. Let me run through some options with you, and these are actual options that I have used. Stir fry. Stir fry is great for using up little bits of ingredients that are left over at the end of the week. If you're not plant-based like us, then you can add a little bit of egg to it, a little bit of scrambled egg, or you can use up little bits of meat that you had left over. The nice thing about stir fry is it's like an adventure. It turns out differently every single time.
Here's another idea, teriyaki rice salad.
Mexican rice, super easy to make, and that once again can be stretched a number of different ways. You can add marinara sauce to that leftover rice, layer it in a crock pot, and put a little bit of fresh basil over the top. Now you can put the lid on the crock pot and just warm it through a couple of hours on high. But you can also take some shredded cabbage and additional marinara sauce. You're going to layer it just like you would a lasagna in that crock pot. The flavors meld together very, very well. And once again, cabbage is generally very inexpensive and it lasts in your refrigerator for a really long time. It's another example of a super inexpensive base ingredient you can use to create recipes that are going to feed your family for multiple meals. Sort of like a deconstructed stuffed cabbage, only in layers in the crock pot.
You can also add leftover beans to the rice and make some bean burgers, and those are really good. They're a big hit in this household.
Bean and rice burgers, so you know, I've done the math. They cost about 15 cents each, and they freeze really, really well.
Food prep number 3 tip is to use creative ingredient substitutions.
Let's just say, for instance, that you have a recipe that calls for cauliflower, but you have some broccoli on hand. Most of the times you can substitute that broccoli instead of cauliflower and it works out just fine. Really, substitutions are just a matter of knowing what flavor profiles are close enough together that you can substitute and sort of still get the same result in the recipe. So don't be afraid to play around and substitute ingredients that you already have on hand, especially if it's going to make it so that you avoid walking into that grocery store.
Hope uses recipes as a basic guideline. Mostly, it's an inspiration for her to make something really good that might just be similar to what they're trying to have you make.
Prep number 4, I'm sure many of you use this already, and that is batch cooking and freezing.
Yes.
People get kind of afraid when you start talking about bulk cooking or batch cooking because they tend to think of that in terms of something that's going to take them an entire day to do. Really, at its heart, bulk cooking or batch cooking can be done in a couple of 2-hour sessions throughout the week. Let's just say you're going to double the recipe that you're already making for supper that night. You're already getting all the ingredients out anyway. It's super easy just to make a second portion and then freeze that portion for later. You can also, once again, take some of the base ingredients that I've been talking about, make 2 or 3 of those recipes one night. It'll take you about 2 hours in the evening, and you'll have food to feed your family for several days.
Food prep tip number 5 is to use scraps and peels to make a vegetable broth.
This is easy to do. As you're prepping your food, you take the washed leftover peels or maybe the core of the cauliflower or your broccoli. Sometimes I add some herbs. In fact, speaking of herbs, all of the thick stems of herbs that you use, fresh herbs, save those also for your vegetable broth. It's going to add some of that herby flavor to the finished vegetable broth. Set that aside in your freezer. I usually have a gallon bag that I have labeled broth veggies. Once I've got a whole gallon bag of it, it's super easy to dump it into the pressure cooker. You're going to add water to cover it. Once it's covered with water, put the lid on the pressure cooker, pressure cook it for 17 minutes and let the pressure naturally release. You'll have some amazing vegetable broth that costs you virtually nothing because you made it with the scraps and with the peels that you normally would have thrown away in the first place.
Food prep tip number 6 is to repurpose stale and overripe items.
Look, we all know that banana that's going a little bit brown, a little bit soft, it's sitting on your kitchen counter. It does not need to be thrown out. Instead, it needs new life. It needs to be a smoothie, or it needs to be banana bread, or it needs to be peeled and thrown into your freezer to be made one of those 2 things later. Just because something is a little past its peak doesn't mean it's ready to be thrown out.
Food prep tip number 7 is to use your ingredients in your refrigerator as you go through it to clean it out. This will help you to get rid of things that are just about ready to expire. You're going to be saving them from the trash can.
This is our favorite thing to do in the whole wide world, guys. Every Thursday, we have what we call our perishable food inventory. We fill out a perishable food inventory sheet, and that sheet is what, guys? Say it with me. It is prioritized. And that means that the items that are getting ready to go bad, those are the items that go at the top of that list. Here's what happens. On Thursdays, it's getting near Friday. It's been a long week. You're feeling like there's no food in your house to eat. And you're going to be very sorely tempted to head into the drive-thru, especially on Friday when it's the end of the work week. This will help you avoid that, my friend. Do the perishable food inventory. You'll be amazed at the items that are sitting in your refrigerator or produce that is sitting out on your counter that you can use to creatively make meals. We have done this for years. When we started doing it, it did indeed drop our overall grocery budget. A weekly perishable food inventory day. Create a menu plan out of everything that is in your refrigerator, and you will save some serious money.
Food prep tip number 8 is use a slow cooker or an Instant Pot.
For one thing, these appliances will both help you to take cheaper cuts of meat and also take dried beans and not only cook them so that they're well done, but also cook them in a shorter period of time. And to boot, they also use less energy than most of the other appliances that you have in your kitchen.
Earlier in the video, Hope showed you that when you're working with major ingredients that's for batch cooking, you can save those ingredients to make other things later on with them. And that way that stretches what you're doing. Food prep tip number 9 is to stretch that meat.
Now, this is easy for us because we're plant-based, but we recognize that a lot of you are not plant-based. Look, buy meat only when it's on sale. When you find a great deal on a piece of meat, buy several packages of it and repackage it when you get back home. Instead of throwing the store packaging with the meat in it into the freezer, think carefully about how much of that meat you really need for each recipe you're going to be making. Cut that meat up into smaller portions and then put it in individual serving size bags. Put those bags into the freezer. What you'll do is you'll stretch that meat because you will be using less meat per recipe. And speaking of using less meat per recipe, if you'll take a piece of meat, let's say you have left over, and cut it into small bits and put it, say, in a casserole with some rice and also some vegetables and maybe a little bit of cheese, what's going to happen is that meat is going to be distributed throughout that recipe. You'll still have the meat, but you'll be using far less meat in the process and stretching it so it feeds more people.
If you want to stretch your meat supply, use lentils, maybe 2 cups of lentils into your hamburger recipe. I think that lentils taste an awful lot like meat anyway, so this is a good way to make it stretch.
Now, although the way that you prep food is, as we showed you, going to save you hundreds of dollars throughout the year, how you shop in the grocery store, it's also a huge part of saving money on groceries. To learn how to save money while shopping at the grocery store, watch that video right over there.